Is my screen visible?
Yes, madam.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. So, Chetna, you let me know when we can start, or we are waiting for some more people to join. Okay. In the interest of time, let us start the session. Good morning, everyone. So, as part of this ATAL FDP, as part of this cybersecurity track, the first session is to give an overview about cybersecurity. So, in the course of 5 days, which are part of this session, you would be coming across different technical sessions. There will be some of the sessions which would be focused on processes, the cyber security as a technology, and what we are actually experiencing in the cyber security domain, right? So this particular session is going to be focused only on giving an introduction about cybersecurity. Anyway, this is about me, and anyway, Chetana has given a brief intro about me. Let me just skip. And what we are going to cover in next 60 to 75 minutes is about what is understanding what is cybersecurity, what are the different domains that are there, and what is it actually be the foundation for the cybersecurity, and the different terminologies and the glossary of terms in cybersecurity, which you would be frequently hearing about that, and what are the different controls that are there as part of the both secure protection, detection, and prevention of any cybersecurity threats. And we'll also talk about IT Act, which is the Information Technology Act, which is the governing law for cybersecurity in India. So what it is, right? Many people think the security, I mean, who would be guarding the ATM, or who would be in front of the house to, guard the apartments or something, right? But in similarly, the cyber security, because the cyber is a world where every other devices and individuals are connected with each other, right? So we transfer information, we store information, we process information, and cyber security actually defines the principles how this information should be protected and should be handled in a better way so that it doesn't possess any threats to anyone, any individual, organization, enterprise, or government. Okay, so there are multiple definitions of what cybersecurity is. Okay, cyber or computer security is the protection of computing systems and the data that these systems store or access. This is the widely used definition for cybersecurity, but nevertheless, it is also having a borderless, or rather, like you cannot define in a certain terminologies, right? And security is not a process and not an end state as well. It is a continual process which evolves over a period of time based on what we see, what we want to protect, based on what we want to achieve, right? And it is also about the process of maintaining an acceptable level of perceived risk. So we'll talk about the risk, threats, vulnerabilities, and what its definition, how it is being derived in the due course of the session. But this is what the cybersecurity means, right? And do you think that it is important as an individual? Yes, of course. Cybersecurity is very much important for an individual, for an organization, for an enterprise, for a government to ensure that they safeguard the information, people, and every other asset from the malicious user, right? So there are technologies. So as like any other industry, cyber security also relies on three basic pillars, which is people, process, and technology. So we have different technologies in cyber security industry or the domain, which are there for different purposes, but it working in tandem will make sure that the organization or the government is having a strong controls to protect the assets, right? And why do we need cybersecurity? Because it decreases the threat of the current and future vulnerabilities by institutionalizing different processes, controls, and having a right set of people with the proper skill set, right? So, and it also supports the critical business processes and protect the personal and sensitive information of an individual or the enterprise. So it is so important because cyber is perceived as the top three risk in the organization, right? Because in the current world, everything is interconnected. So when it is getting interconnected, malicious users or the threat actors will try to find a way to compromise it, find a vulnerability, try to exploit it to gain some benefit out of it. Okay. In case of any data that needs to be compromised, they exfiltrate and take an advantage for any purposes, right? It can be for blackmailing or threatening, or it can even be publishing it in the public forums about any individual's personal information, right? From an organization perspective, it is very important to safeguard the information asset. So the information asset is defined as any asset which is holding the information, the data which are of either of the organization, their vendors, their suppliers, their customers, or any government information, right? Of even of their employees as well. So it is very important to make sure that those information or the intellectual property as well, right? It could be a source code, it could be some documentation, it could be some materials, it could be even to relate in the current scenario. So some of the bio organizations who are actually involved in the research to prepare a vaccine for COVID-19, it is very important for them to safeguard their intellectual property on of their research, right? So if you look at this, cyber can be applied across any industry, be it a restaurant, be it any technology industry, manufacturing, wherever, right? So you can apply the thought of information technology over there, and on top of it, to secure such information assets, cyber security is very much required. So that's why across the board, across different organizations, they see cyber as one of the top three risks, along with the financial and law and regulations risk of the organization. Second, dwell time, right? So that dwell time is defined as the time where the actual attack has happened and the time that the organization realized that they have been attacked or breached, right? So it used to be okay. Before talking about that, so there are two type of organization, right? So one organization which actually knows, like, they have the controls to understand that they have got breached, so that they invoke necessary controls processes to make sure that they contain the damage and recover from it. And the second set of organization, they don't have any such kind of processes and controls, so that they don't even know that they got breached, right? So they'll live even if they got breached, they will not even know, and they'll come to know only when their data has been published outside and been advertised by any threat actors outside. So it is very important for an organization to ensure that they safeguard their asset, information asset, and also protect those things from such kind of an attacks, right? So if you look at in 2017, the dwell time is 268 days, which means if an organization, it's an average based on the survey that has been done by the security analyst. So it took 268 days for an organization to understand that they got breached, they got attacked. So now what happens is, because of the awareness on the cyber security is gearing up across the industries, it is considerably getting reduced. So, which means the 268 days has now come to 113 days for in 2019, right? So, which means we can see like how organizations are perceiving it, and how much importance that they are giving, and how much investment they are making to make sure that they have a strong focus on cyber security, invest on it. Plus, they react to any such incidents and the breaches even before it gets bursted out, right? Third, internet users grew more than 10x faster than the global population. So this is one of the studies that has actually given.
Sorry, sir, but there are lots of background noises coming. Your voice is not clearly audible.
I think I'm listening some background noise. Is it
No, I think someone has
on me?
switched on their microphone. I think Someone's microphone is on.
Yeah, I request others to go on mute. Yeah, now it's better.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, as you all
Sir,
know,
sir, you mentioned there is a $200 billion. It is actually $7 trillion lost.
so this is based on 2019 survey. 2020 we are waiting, and this is about the last two, like 200 billion lost and 100 billion been spent. It is on a 2019 survey as against what we have seen versus
Sir,
2018.
sir, if you send me your WhatsApp number, I can forward you just now. In this group, I forwarded already. $7 trillion lost, 3 times the size of India. If you look around, some of your friends already lost money.
Sure, sir. I'll look at it because these are the surveys that's been published by different analysts. So we go with some of the reputed things like Gartner and IDC, their research reports, where it is based on some of the samples that they pick up, right? So, but nevertheless, like yes, I do agree, it will be in
Sir,
trillions.
sir, sir, I got actually video link and also discussion on $7 trillion. I can please forward your number in the group.
Yeah, sure, sir. I'll get it. I'll share my number. You can share it. I'll have a look at it.
My name is M. Howladar. I'm independent researcher, retired.
Sure, sir.
NEC.
Thank you. Yeah. So, and if you look at the numbers that have been put up in terms of how much billion been lost or how much billion been spent, these are the disclosed numbers, right? So we it is very much higher than what we see here, but nevertheless, like what is getting disclosed, because some of the organization, though they get breach, they will not get it disclosed, considering that.
पाहिजे ते कुठलं तरी ओल्ड आणलाय तो नंबर
Yeah, this is a 2019 number. So the just to say, like I mean, this based on the yearly analysis, and this 2019 number. In fact, we have crossed this 200 plus billion in the first quarter of 2020 itself, with the some of the major ransomware attacks. So I have statistics that's called out in the next session as well on how much been the lost in 2020 itself. The study of that, in fact, that actually matches what you say, right? So this is based on the analyst report that have been published in the early 2020, which is on 2019 numbers, right? Because many of the attacks and the breaches they don't even disclose, considering that they will have a non-compliance to regulations like HIPAA and GDPR, which will impose huge penalty on the organization, right? So considering those things, the numbers that we see, it is very minimal, but nevertheless it is more in reality. That is what we see, we anticipate as well. In fact, what is getting now disclosed is more and more, because the cyber threat actors, they don't even they don't even focus only on getting the organization attacked, but also they now threaten the organization if they are not uh, paying the ransom to them, they will get the data published. So the organization is taking every step to make sure that to contain the damage, and they're paying the ransom to the attackers in some of the cases, and sometimes they have to pay penalty to the regulations as well, right? In a way, it has crossed a trillion in 2020, in the early 2020 itself, and we have seen a lot of organizations investment in terms of the cyber security controls, and also appointment of a dedicated function for cyber security and a chief information security officer in the organization in early 2020s, right? So cybersecurity is actually not a new thing. It has evolved over a period of time, when it started with information systems and the technology. And there we were having the basic operating system, and then the programming languages, and IT as an industry has actually had the first footprint on that. And after that, there came the threats like the viruses, right? That's where like people started looking at deploying the controls like antivirus, and then firewall, and then HIDs, all such controls which are part of the IT security, where all these things the industry was looking at. These are the basic controls that are required for any organization or an individual to secure their systems, the computers and the network systems, right? And then adding on top of it, it is not an evolution, rather than as an additional thing, where we see the evolution of the cybersecurity, where operations technology has also been added along with the information technology. So operations technology deals with the what what we call that as a OT in earlier days. Now it is IT, IIoT, sorry, IoT and IIoT, Internet of Things and Industrial Internet of Things. So such kind of a technology has also been considered as part of the information technology and OT technology security, and it is very much needed for deploying the controls to secure those. So OT is being used in industries, in power plants, grid, everywhere, right? Manufacturing industries and energy and utility industries as well. So it is very much important for them to secure their OT infrastructure. That's where like it has also been brought up and as the scope for securing it. And then it has evolved as a information security. So when we look at the information security, it has laid the foundation which which has actually defined the policy for information security, to define what needs to be secured, how we need to secure. So then based on the information security policy, every other organization start developing the processes, procedures, standards and guidelines, right? So when it has been evolving, there comes the flavor of the regulations coming in, the standards coming in, like ISO 27001, which is on information security management system, which is predominantly to oversee the test of effectiveness, test of design and test of effectiveness in the audit terminology. And when you look at the evolution of the technology, the threads, everything, when it is getting interconnected, and also it's not only applies for an organization, and then it is also applies for an individual on a personal capacity, then it is what we call that as a cyber security, where everything is interconnected, and we see um, lot of potential of any attacks or breaches that can happen, because it has evolved over a period of time, and there are multiple vulnerabilities, there are multiple misconfiguration or security weaknesses, which gives an advantage for the threat actors or the malicious user to take an advantage of the situation to create any potential damage. So cybersecurity relies on three basic principles: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So confidentiality is to ensure the information remains confidential and is being made available only to the authorized individuals, right? So it also ensures that the level of controls that we deploy, um, which prevents from any unauthorized access. Let's take an example of any confidential information, like one of the how to say one of the organizations of financial data, right? Before even it's been announced, it is actually strictly confidential or restricted information. So such information would be ideally be available only to the CFO, the financial organization, and also the CEOs of the organization, right? It is not been made available to anyone else. That's how, I mean, the controls and the processes that have been deployed to ensure that that information is secured to be made available to certain set of users who are authorized, that defines confidentiality. It also prevents from unauthorized usage and also unavoidable disclosures as well. So from the integrity perspective, it defines the that knowing that no one has been able to change the information, which means we rely on that information with complete confidence. That ensures the integrity. So it also the controls that have been deployed to ensure the integrity, which ensures that the alterations or any modifications to that particular data is completely tracked, logged, whether it is in storage, what we call that as at rest data, or during the transit when you are accessing it remotely, and are also in process when it is being there in the database and getting processed. We know, keep a track of what has actually happened to that particular data, and what all the chain of events that has happened for it to get changed over a period of time. And also by looking at the logs and the track, we can ensure the integrity of the data. So it is usually usually we apply this principle heavily in cyber forensics, where we measure the integrity of the data, where we capture the integrity of the evidence. It is a hash value that we derive. It could be in any of the hashing algorithms like MD5 or SHA-1, SHA-256, everything. And that defines the integrity of the data. That also gives a confidence that the data is not altered or it is intact, right? And the last principle is availability. So we need to make sure that the relevant information is being made available to any individual when there is a need, right? So it is a predominantly taken up from the IT principle, where they keep a track of availability of the resources, be it a server or network devices. Here in cybersecurity as well, we need to make sure that the information is being made available when there is a need, right? So the threats like denial of service and all will actually target this particular principle to ensure that the service is being made unavailable. That's what we call that as a denial of service, right? So this is to ensure that, like, we have put up a lot of controls in place to have a fault tolerance, high availability, redundancy, and also when something goes wrong, we have the reliable backups, right? To restore it and run the business. And it also ensures the prevention of data loss or destruction as well. So all these three principles of cybersecurity doesn't work in silos. So they work in tandem, and you can apply these principles wherever you want. And any impact to either of these, either confidentiality, integrity, or availability, or all three, is considered as a security incident, right? So that's the definition of any cyber security incident. So cyber security, when we talk about, there are many things, there are many jargons and terminologies that we use in the context of cyber security. And there are four terminologies that you need to be very well aware about, because these are the things that everyone is looking at, as the basic terminologies that they need to be aware as a cybersecurity professional or anyone who is practicing cybersecurity. So the first one is about the asset, right? I used to term that as an information asset. So it is the asset is something that
Hello, sir, you are not audible.
Disturbance from that some Nagara or something. I have muted it. Sir, please.
Sangamesh sir, you are muted. Please unmute once.
Sorry, I think they have muted me as well. Sorry about
Yes, sir.
it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry for the
Yeah.
interruption.
No, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah.
So asset is something that what we are trying to protect, right? It can be anything, any information, data, any systems, network, infrastructure, application, anything for that matter, right? That is what something that we are trying to protect. The asset will have the information that we are trying to protect. That is its definition. Vulnerability is defined as a security weakness or a gap which is which possesses, or rather which I mean by exploitation of that, any unauthorized individual gains access to the information that are on the assets, right? So the vulnerabilities can be um, the security misconfiguration, right? Or it can be any of the services, unwanted services running, or it can be technical vulnerability like some software or the service which are um, uh, exposed to some kind of a buffer overflow attack, or any application which are vulnerable to cross-site scripting or SQL injection, which means such kind of an attack with, methods can be used to gain an advantage by exploiting that particular vulnerability, right? And a threat is actually defined what we are trying to protect against, right? So we spoke about the asset which we are trying to protect, and we spoke about vulnerability. So if the asset is actually vulnerable, it is exposed to some kind of a threats, right? We spoke about the denial of service, right? It is actually a threat to an organization. If any of your asset by software itself is vulnerable to denial of service vulnerability, then you are exposed to such kind of a threats. Any malicious user or the attackers or threat actors will try to take an advantage of the situation to initiate an attack and ensure that they succeed in their operation, right? So you need to look at in terms of what kind of a threats that you are exposed to, you are living with, all such things, by doing certain security testing or the vulnerability assessment or penetration testing, so that you gain a visibility of what kind of a threats that you are living with. So finally, risk, right? Risk is actually the intersection of assets, threats, and vulnerabilities, right? It is usually calculated with the summation of all these three. So based on the risk score that you derive, so you can actually have a rating scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 based on the organization how they want to define for each asset, threat, and vulnerability, right? So when you get it defined, when you do a summation of it, you know what is actually your risk exposure to the public world, or even to the internal, within the internal organization as well. So when your risk score is high, which means you are living with a high risk and your controls are not effective, your processes are not effective, and that leads to yeah, weak cyber security implementation of your controls and processes. And it is usually measured with the heat map in threat likelihood on x-axis, and occurrence on y-axis, in terms of going from low to critical. So some of the organization will adopt 4 scale rating, which spans from low, medium, high, and critical across both y-axis and x-axis. And also some of the organization will actually adopt a 3-scale rating, which is a low, medium, and high. So it is up to the organization who can decide on what is the level of scale that they want to measure the risk of their organization. If you look at, we spoke about risk, right? So ideally, the risk assessment is a process, right? It needs to be institutionalized from the basic uh, definition of what is actually categorized as a risk for an organization. You first define what is the definition of the risk, what is going to be your risk appetite. So risk appetite is something defined as what is the acceptable limit or the level of risk that an organization can withhold. So if it is beyond the acceptable limit, we have some 4 phases where we decide on how to handle that particular or how to manage that particular risk, right? So as part of the security risk assessment, we usually define or we define the scope of the entire risk assessment predominantly by looking at the documents review, right? So usually the organization or the, I'm talking about the industry, but now because of the ISO standard being adopted by some of the institutions as well, it is very much required to document whatever you do, right? So there are 2 things: what document whatever you do, and the second one is whatever you do, document it. Okay, so that has been adopted. So everything is actually getting into the documentation, the knowledge base repository, or the the document management system, right? So every other information is driven or processed or handled with a specific process. Okay, so all these processes are defined. So ideally when we do a risk assessment, we look at those processes, whatever is being documented, we review that, identify the gaps in the documented process itself, right? It is based on the interviews and the audits with the respective stakeholder or the owner of the respective process, and we also get those things tagged with the assets for the contextualization. When I say contextualization, the process is actually getting implemented on your assets, the information assets, right? So that's why we build the contextualization around that, and we do an assessment to understand what all the threats that it is exposed to. And how we do it is what we call that as a threat modeling, which means we understand the assets, the systems, the application, everything. So we actually look at what kind of a threats that it can get exposed to, right? So when we look at as an the public facing websites, right? So what kind of a threats it gets exposed to? So it can actually exposed to denial of service attack, if there is a login page, brute force attack, if there is a application it can also experience the attacks, application layer attacks, like people trying to do cross-site scripting, SQL injection, command injection, shell injection, all such kind of attacks. So those are the things that we do it. I mean, we call that as a tabletop exercise to brainstorm among the team to come out with the conceptual threats for the respective information asset. And then we also look at what all the security incidents that have happened so far in the organization in past, because we also need to know like what is happening so that we can prioritize those things as part of the risk, because we want to pick up the low hanging fruits, which means whatever the threats that are predominantly being seen in the organization or in the ecosystem, that gains more importance from a risk perspective, and that is what that's why we look at the historical security incidents that have happened and get that attributed to risk. So when the asset information along with the context plus the threat information, we look at why those incidents have happened. Is that through some of the vulnerabilities which are operational in nature or physical in nature, right? So cyber security is not something that we look at only on a cyber perspective, right? Physical security is also part of cyber security, because if you see cyber security controls, if when you are actually you know getting into any organization, so you'll be given a proximity card, right? So that is the physical entry or physical access that you are gaining it, but from there everything is actually getting correlated with your logical data. So after coming enter into an organization, what you do, so in the back end all information is getting cross correlated to understand what is happening in and around in the network, right? So that's why both logical and physical information are very much important. So from an operational perspective, we look at the liability issues, the security personnel, and the internal policies, the training, because as I mentioned, three pillars of cybersecurity, right? Like people, process, and technology. So while you define a robust policy, process, procedure, everything, it is equally important to strongly focus on people's training to create an awareness on them in terms of how to do that, how to implement that process, because you need to have a right skilled set of people at the right place to execute, so that you have the better cyber security program in an organization. So ideally we say that it is an interplay of people, process, and technology. All these three gives a successful cyber security program. These are the things from an operational perspective. And when we are looking at physical perspective, because IoT is an integral part of the domain, cybersecurity domain, and we look at the smart lights and then electronic systems and then building management systems, everything, right? So if you look at even some of the gardens where the sprinklers have been deployed, is actually managed or monitored through the BMS, the what they call that as a building management system, where all these things are timed, and then it works remotely without any manual intervention. So all these are programmed and are getting monitored, right? And second one is about the escalators that you see in the airports or any organizations, right? Elevators, escalators. So those are also now it is completely interconnected with the business building management system. So it is very important for us to give a focus on that, because if a malicious user gains an advantage of that particular controller, say suppose instead of doing a 20 rpm which goes in a normal pace, I increase it to 50, which means it goes with the faster pace, right? Both elevator and escalator. So which is creating more damage or impact to its regular operations. So that's why we bring everything together, both in terms of the physical and logical, and also the operational aspect of it, and holistically looking at what all the vulnerabilities that it are exposed to. I mean, by doing the security assessments, it could be technical vulnerabilities, or it could be process gap as well, right? And putting all these things, three things together, right? We do a comprehensive risk assessment where we look at what is the risk score, what is the threat likelihood, what is its occurrence. Based on that, what is the total risk exposure of an organization across different things, and it also gives an opportunity for an improvement by deploying some of the risk mitigation controls. So risk mitigation is something, the measure that we take to reduce the risk. It can be reduced or it can be avoided as well. But still, what we are trying to do to address that particular risk, right? So that is what we call that as a risk mitigation. There are four types of risk mitigation: accept, avoid, transfer, and reduce, right? So any risk that we are living with, so if it is below the risk appetite, right, I have defined the risk appetite as acceptable limit, acceptable range where an organization can live with. So if a risk score is less than the risk appetite, then we can accept the risk because it is not going to create much damage or impact to the organization. So when it is beyond the risk appetite level, there comes a decision making thought process whether you want to avoid the risk or transfer the risk or reduce the risk, right? So if you want to avoid the risk, which means by deploying some of the risk mitigation strategies, you can avoid. So say suppose if an organization doesn't have a antivirus itself, right, or a firewall itself, you still have a risk of getting attacked and any intrusion can happen within your organization. How you can avoid is by deploying an antivirus or firewall or IPS. So by deploying all such controls, so ideally you can avoid any intrusions by deploying a strong and stringent policies deployed on those controls, right? So when you have a firewall, when you know like these are the people who has to access these resources, deploy appropriate access control list to ensure like who can actually pass through and access the information asset or the resource. You avoid the risk of being that information asset or the resource exposure to the entire set of population, right? So that's how you can avoid the risk transfer. So ideally when you look at any of the risk, like now the organizations are experiencing cyber attacks left and right, especially in the current pandemic situation. Many organizations are experiencing ransomware attacks, denial of service attack, and also in terms of phishing, all such things. So when you can take appropriate measures to either reduce the risk or try to avoid the risk, but it eventually doesn't give you 100% protection. So ideally what you have to do is what the organization is thinking is to transfer that risk by obtaining cyber insurance, right? So we take life insurance policies, right, just to make sure that we reduce the risk and getting it transferred, and if something happens, at least there is a support to our family members. Similarly, when any cyber attack happens and there is an impact to the organization, the liability is with the organization, but still to ensure that the recovery, they have some kind of a foothold, they transfer the risk by obtaining cyber insurance. So there are insurance organization which offer safety insurance as one of their offering, which understand the organization's security posture, cyber exposure, understanding how much they have the control, how much is the controls are effective, and accordingly they define the premium and give the insurance to the organization, where the organization is transferring that particular risk by obtaining it. The fourth one is reducing the risk, right? So how we can reduce is like let's take an example of a phishing attack, right? So every other organization, even an individual, is getting phished. They are getting phishing emails, right? When you look at some of the mails coming to you mentioning that you have won 1 lakh rupees, just sign in with your Google account to claim it. So which means your Google credentials are getting harvested, right? So you are actually redirecting to an impersonated site where they start collecting the information about you, your sensitive information, your personal information. It is not only about your credentials like your username or password, but in case like that there are phishing emails which are impersonating the banks and will capture your banking credentials, and some phishing sites will actually be collecting the information about your credit card or debit card information, or sometimes it also collects your Aadhaar card. They mentioned that as like to wanted I mean to verify, we wanted to capture we wanted you to key in your Aadhaar number or PAN number, all those things, right? So these are PII, what we call that as, like personally identifiable information, which is sensitive. So the attackers are more focused in terms of harvesting those details as part of the phishing campaigns, right? How we can reduce that particular risk is by creating security awareness program. Okay, you keep yourself abreast of about what is happening in the cyber landscape from a threat perspective, and also being aware about what is happening and how you can actually prevent yourself by not falling prey to such kind of threats, right? By creating an awareness, you are actually reducing the risk of people not clicking any phishing links when they receive any phishing mailers or something, right? So this is about the basic definition about the risk mitigation strategies, which is acceptance, avoidance, risk transfer, and the reduction of the risk. So we have a framework for cybersecurity, which is actually defined by NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, and it is actually now we have the latest version, which is having the 5 scale of yearly. It used to be 6 scale in its earlier version. So the 5 scale of or rather like 5 stages of NIST cybersecurity framework um, is classified across the stages of all cybersecurity processes and controls. You can apply this thought process, this framework across any of the processes. It starts from identification, protection, detection, respond, and recover. So there is an influence of what can actually happen when any cybersecurity incident happens, right? Or being experienced. That there is a strong influence of it, but nevertheless, like NIST cybersecurity framework can be applied across your vulnerability management program or your security operations or any of your what to say the standard or network security or security engineering as well, right? In fact, your cybersecurity BCP program is based on this NIST cybersecurity framework. So from the identify in the identify stage, so it actually it is the phase where we actually plan and prepare. So probably I'll try to touch upon on ISO standard as well, so that we cover both and see how it is getting overlapped. So here in NIST we call that as identify, whereas in ISO 27035 we call that as a plan and prepare, which means we take proactive measures to identify and define the controls, define the processes, define understand the threats, and how we want to execute this particular cybersecurity program, right? So it can be like who has to have the access to your organization or the information, conducting the background checks of the employees so that you don't have anyone with the criminal records in your organizations. This is a preliminary check that's been done by the organization, all the organization, and also ensure that like everyone's has having a individual user account, so that we know the we have the proper accountability of whatever is done by the respective employee, and also by creating the policies and procedures for cyber security. So the information security policy is actually the governing policy for all the entire cyber security program. It gets translated, or rather broken down into chunks to have different processes within the cybersecurity program. So when you define the process, it can be both a technical process or it can be non-technical as well. So when I say technical processes, it involves the technology, where we have the vulnerability management program, and then the security operations, security monitoring, and then network architecture review or security engineering, whatever it comes, right? And the non-security or rather non-technology processes, which is predominantly like the risk assessment, your awareness program, your the upkeep of your policy review or process review. All these things are non-technical. So this particular things are derived as a process which is based on what has been defined in your cybersecurity or information security policy. So the next level is about defining the procedures. Ideally, we call that as SOPs or playbooks, runbooks, all these things, right? Like policy, the next level hierarchy is process, the next level hierarchy is procedure, and then we have the standards, and then finally we have the guidelines. The next phase of the NIST framework is protect. In terms of when we have the when we create a user account, we we give the access to them, and how we want to limit it or how we want to protect it. Okay, I'm just taking an example so that I can touch upon on all the 5 phases, but nevertheless, like the principle can be applied anywhere, right? So we created a user account in the first phase, and second phase, how we want to secure that, even the identity itself, by ensuring by defining a strong authentication policies, right, or the password policies, what we call, and also ensuring that that particular identity is not being misused by creating a awareness with the people, but by not sharing the credentials with anyone else. And also we have the complete accountability of what is being accessed by which individual. Okay, in such a way, by defining appropriate process on defining the ACLs, access control list, both at the network layer with the IP addresses, or at the the folder level, where we define which identity has to have relevant access, in such a way like you try to protect your information asset, right? And it can actually span across by protecting your network, your web server, your application server, or even your employee details, where I mean the database where your employee details are stored, right? And then the next phase, when you have all these things in an organization, you also need to have the controls to detect any anomalies or intrusion. So that's where you will actually strategize your cyber defense approach, and start looking at the controls that can actually be deployed on your information asset to detect any anomalies. So it could be your antivirus, it could be your firewall, NIPS, advanced persistent threat solutions, I mean anti-APT, or what we call, or the processes like the MDR, like managed defense, managed detection and response. All these things are being looked at and being deployed. So this is the phase which actually be enabling you to have the visibility of what is happening, right? And once everything is going well, so we don't need to be worried about. But when something goes wrong, that's where it is very important to have a rapid response. So we call that as an incident response. um, right? Even I mean, when we look at from the vulnerability management perspective, when you detect any vulnerability, you need to respond back immediately with a strategy or the plan to remediate those vulnerabilities. Okay, from an incident perspective, when something goes wrong, you will immediately be responding to it in terms of having a proper containment by isolating the threat, and then by having just give me a minute. Sorry. So, by having a proper incident response in place, and by having that, we'll be limiting or containing the situation, thus by creating avoiding any major impact. And once we contain, the final stage is about the recovery, right? When something goes wrong, we actually recover the situation to back to its normal, and it will be in the BAU as like business as usual. So it could be through rebuilding it or restoring it from the reliable backups or whatever, right? So this is the entire phases, and what we call that as a life cycle, right? So the recovery stage and the response, ideally the recovery stage will actually give a feedback for your better planning and the preparation, which gives more insights, so that it gives an opportunity for your further improvement of the processes, right? So there are different cybersecurity domains. So one is about the asset security, where the organization look at CMDB as a single authoritative source for your entire information assets, be it the physical as comes in. We want to secure, that covers about the asset security. Second one is about the security architecture and engineering, where it actually
Madam,
focuses on your. Hello.
madam, we have to attend the central in inauguration. It is almost 11:03 now. So what to do? That link has been shared on the WhatsApp group.
Hello, sir. Sorry to interrupt. Actually, 11 to 11:30, we have a central inauguration. It was announced
Central,
during,
cen-
yeah,
huh.
central inauguration is there. So all participants need to join that. Just for half an hour, sir.
Okay, so I was told like the session is till
So
11:15.
can we leave this link? Can we leave this meeting now, madam?
No, no, you can be there in this meeting. It is using some other tools, WebEx it is. So in WebEx, you can just join and come back to this. You need not leave this meeting actually.
Okay, madam. Okay.
Yeah. Hello. So actually 11 to 11:30 is a inauguration session is there, sir. So along with the break is also included in that.
Okay, fine,
Hello.
Chetna. Because I was
Hello,
told
sir.
that,
Sir.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, shall we continue or?
So shall we continue at 11:30, sir? From 11:30?
Yeah, sure.
But you need not leave the meeting. You can just
Yes,
rejoin and you can just restart from where you left at from 11,
we
at
will,
11:30.
madam. Yes. We will rejoin at 11:30, but we will not leave the meeting
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
that the
That's
two
better,
parallel
sir.
meetings cannot be done.
Correct, because it is separate
Uh,
tool, so it
uh,
can be done.
uh, okay, I will
Thank
join
you.
it from the laptop. No
Yeah,
problem.
sorry for the inconvenience, Sangesh, sir.
No problem. Let's regroup at 11:30, and let's
Yeah,
continue.
yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. So, hello everyone, welcome back. Let me know when we can start the session.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, hi Chetna.
Yeah, I think we can start, sir. It's 11:30 now. We can start our session. And welcome back, sir.
Thank you. Yeah. So we spoke about asset security. Security architecture and engineering is actually the domain which focuses on the entire network security and its architecture and how the controls can be deployed. So which is a predominantly your enterprise architecture and how you engineer the entire or rather how you orchestrate the controls within the organization, right? That's about it. And communication and network security predominantly focuses on the security controls like firewall and IDS, IPS, switches, routers, and how it can be leveraged to secure the organization. Software development security, it is a predominantly from application perspective in terms of how we can develop a secure software free from vulnerabilities. If not, at least like um, uh, at least detecting the vulnerabilities and getting it fixed right at its earlier stage of the development, right? DevSecOps is actually the approach for the software development security, which is widely been adopted, where the security testing is an iterative process right from the initial stage of the application development and have frequent sprint releases to complement with the DevOps strategy. The next one, what we have is identity and access management. This is predominantly around the user accounts, the identity that it creates, the logical identity of an individual, right? And what all the level of access that he has and what all the resources that he has the access, so how it is being managed, because this is one of the important domain within cybersecurity, because if it is not being properly implemented, then a malicious user or unauthorized user can gain access to any sensitive information, right, with the improper access controls being defined. And the next one is about security assessments and testing, which is where like a vulnerability assessment, penetration testing on the systems, computer systems, infrastructure, applications are happening. Threat modeling is actually part of security assessments only. And now organizations started implementing the red teaming process where the security analyst, they themselves will think from an attacker's perspective and try to break in the controls of an organization which is claimed to be secure. Okay, they are ethically bound to break the controls either through technically or through functional or with its functionality. Okay, so this is an adoption in the industry to have a red teaming, so that they bring more granular aspect of how the or rather like what is the actual security posture of an organization's infrastructure and application. Next one is on the security operations. So we spoke about the incidents that are happening, right? So ideally, security operations is the process where security analysts look at the monitoring platforms like SI, security information and event management platforms, UEBA as a platform, and the logs generated by your antivirus controllers or the management console or firewalls, your IDS, IPS, and then your Active Directory, everything flowing to the common platform, and the security operations is the process which takes care of its security monitoring, identify any anomalous behavior or incidents, based on the deployed use cases, initiate an incident response process. And the next one is about the security governance, risk and compliance management, which predominantly a non-technical aspect, but it is one of the important domain within cybersecurity. The cybersecurity governance will oversee all the metrics of the cybersecurity program, and I mean in terms of its operational metrics, key performance indicators and key risk indicators as well. And the outcome of such governance assessment will be fed into the organization's defensive strategy. Okay, in terms of where we lag, what is that we are exposed to, and how are we performing over a period of time, why we are not performing in certain some of the areas, what is the risk that it is actually coming out of it. All such things would be taken care by the security governance. So risk we had spoken about, and the compliance management is taking a lead role here because of certain countries imposing law and regulations for the organization. So GDPR is one such thing, and it has been implemented in EU, and any organizations which is operating or process or having transaction with any of the organizations within EU, they have to comply with the GDPR compliance. And HIPAA is one of the compliance for the healthcare, and PCI DSS for the BFSI sector, banking, financial insurance companies, and all have to adhere to it, right? These are the things that are, these are the high level domains which are part of cyber security. And in the next few days you have the technical training sessions on ethical hacking, and then the cryptography, encryption, all such things are there. So if you look at all these comes under some of the other major domains on these, right? Yeah. And we spoke about all these things, and if you look at the evolution of cybersecurity controls, it started in early 1990s, where we had, in fact, it is up to 1990s, I would say. It is not on the 90s era. We had antivirus, firewalls, anti-spam, IDS, IPS, and HAPS playing a major role. That's where like there is a need for the information technology security has got emerged, right? And in between 2005 to 2010, we had the technology evolution based on the threats that we had seen. We have the technology coming in, like data leakage prevention, application aware firewalls, and the processes like vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, and all coming into place. And the technology like SIEM, I mean, for especially for the log aggregation, and also applying the security use cases to do the security monitoring, right? That has actually come into existence. And we also have the deep packet inspection, so which is to look at intercepting the packets in the network and see like see the behavior of any such traffic. Because if you look at in the early days, the data were exfiltrated over email or network, over website or something, right? I visit some page and I just upload some of the confidential information. So to detect those things, we had a DLP in place. So because it was the initial stage of the DLP technology, it had its own limitation. That's what the technology of deep packet inspection has come into place, where we look at the packet, the information at the packet, because DLP as a technology can work only based on the policies that you define, right? You cannot define the policies for all confidential information in your network, right? So whatever you define, it gives a visibility whether someone is trying to exfiltrate that data. But whereas for the other things, we will still have a blind spot. So when any incident that happens, so deep packet inspection, it gives a better visibility of looking at the packet layer in terms of what kind of information is actually seen in the network which are going outside, right? And between 2010 to 2014 is what the evolution of anti-APT controls came, because of the major attacks and breaches that have been seen, be it RSA breach or any of the other organizations that are getting breached, right, for a monetary benefit or for any other reason by the threat actors. It is very important that to have a control in place to handle and manage such kind of an advanced persistent threat, right? When I say advanced persistent threat, it is an advanced and sophisticated threats which is custom tailored and focused targeted malware, or it need not be a malware but also can be part of any of the campaign as well. That's where the evolution of anti-APT has come. We have seen the technologies like user and entity behavioral analytics and security analytics coming into picture, where it has actually addressed the challenges of SIEM. So SIEM as a technology works with the correlation rules, right? So it predominantly looks at the time. It is actually a time bound and a threshold based. Say suppose to detect any brute force attack, you can define the rule that any 3 invalid attempts are seen in 1 minute, okay, then flag it as a brute force attack. But what if the attacker is initiating slow attack, like only one failure attempt in a minute, then it will not be detected at all by SIM as a technology. That's where UEBA as a technology that has come with the ability of detecting slow and low attacks as well, because this particular technology is completely based on machine learning and artificial intelligence. The data science aspect has been brought in here, where we define what should be considered as a anomalous behavior. So UEBA as a platform will take 6 to 8 weeks for the learning with both the structured and unstructured data. And once it baselines the behavior of an identity or an entity, then any deviation would be attributed to a risk score, which is which is classified as an anomalous behavior and attributes to a risk score based on what kind of a behavior that it had seen, right? It has been defined as well. So based on that, we can even detect slow and low attacks as well. So, and then there comes the unified threat management thought process. It is not a complete implementation of it. Some of the products, they claim that as a UTM product, but nevertheless, like it was at its earliest stage during 2014. The thought process of unified threat management has evolved during this period, where different controls like firewall having a IPS blade as well, and then anti-bot within it. So we don't need to have multiple controls for different things. Rather, like a unified approach has been adopted by the industry to develop such kind of a approach to have unify different purposes, or rather different technologies are addressing different purposes to make it in a single solution where it actually seamlessly it can work with each other. Between 2015 to 2016, we had seen the web application firewall and security gateways coming into picture. In fact, web application firewall in earlier days was adopted in a minimal scale, but widely been accepted between 2015 to 2016. DDoS security is one of the other thing that has gained more importance. CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker, and then Privileged Identity Management and Privileged Access Management has been widely been adopted by the industry during this time period. Between 2017 and 2018, we had seen the adoption of threat intelligence and threat hunting. Threat intelligence has started a decade back, but it was not actually been consumed as a threat intelligence. Later, Gartner has actually identified that threat intelligence is part of the hype circle, and they see threat intelligence is going to play a major role in future, and that's why they coined that cyber threat intelligence as a buzzword. And industry started adopting that buzzword and start developing the controls, or rather the collecting the threat intelligence, sourcing it from both, both from the black hat hackers and ethical hackers, and then provide that as an intelligence, and then based on different incidents and breaches happening, some of the product vendors, they consume those things and make it available as a commercial threat intelligence as well, right? And deception is one of the technologies that has gained a momentum during this time period. Deception is an evolution of, or I would say like a next generation of honeypot and honey nets, right? So deception, as of now, we have the implementation of deception v3, where it has the capability of consuming the threat intelligence, and then being dynamic in terms of warning threat actors when they touch the deceptive decoys or breadcrumbs, right? And deception is not looked at as a solution or the technology by the organizations, that is looked at as a strategy. Okay, so wherever the organization is having a blind spot for not having any kind of a detection or detection control, that's where they start deploying the deceptive decoys to gain the visibility even on the blind spots and the gray areas. Security orchestration, automation, and response is the other technology that has been brought into cybersecurity and widely been adopted or implemented in the security operations for the rapid incident response, and to have a quicker mean time to respond and mean time to resolve as well for an incident, right? And currently, breach and attack simulation is one of the technology that's been widely been adopted by the organization, where they have a controlled environment. They deploy the organization security controls over there and test their processes as against live threats, right? And that actually gives a confidence or gives a visibility of how an organization is prepared if they are experiencing any such kind of a threat or attack in their environment, right? So today some XYZ organization is experiencing an attack, right? And if we understand, if we understand how the attack has been orchestrated, we can actually orchestrate within this controlled environment, simulate the entire attack and understand whether the deployed controls has the capability to detect and alert of such kind of an attack happening, right? CyberRange is another platform for the security analyst for their training purposes. Especially this is where both the blue team and red team played together in a common arena, right? So red team will initiate the attacks, and then blue team will actually detect and then respond to it. They practice their skills, right? That is the CyberRange platform. And the container security is actually gaining the momentum because now the containers are being adopted widely in the industry, Kubernetes, Dockers, and all. So container security is at its most important, gaining most importance in the recent days. When you see the, we spoke about the controls, and if you see the trend, so between 2005 to 2008 is what the regulations are started influencing within cybersecurity domain, where we see information security controls and processes are being developed, right? And ISO standards have come into place for the specifically for information security or cyber security. And 2008 to 2014 we had seen the e-discovery coming into place, complementing with the DLP, and then more focus on endpoint security and virtualization, and APTs started coming into picture, and GRC has had the in cybersecurity domain. And between 2010 to 2014, that's where the trend has changed from not only being just looking at the logs and being analyzing it. Here it is where um, the analytics of the log analytics has been done to detect the threats proactively, and there's a strong adoption of the cloud and bring your own device. OT and IoT security has been amalgamated within the ecosystem, and between this period is what the industry has adopted to do, or rather focus on the network traffic analysis, basically the deep packet inspection as a technology that we spoke earlier, right? Between 2015 to 2016, we have seen the adoption of the behavioral analytics, right? The UEBA as a platform, and then GDPR compliance has come into place. SOAR as a technology, it has had the initial footprint and been looked at. In fact, before even SOAR as a technology coming into place, there are some orchestration and automation platforms for the cyber security controls, ideally been leveraged for consuming the threat intelligence. If it is a blacklisted IP address, the automation platform will actually consume it and actually orchestrate to apply the firewall policy to block any traffic coming from such kind of an IP address. If it is a phishing, then it actually updates the proxy policy to get it blocked. So we define the policies and the rules accordingly so that it automates the work, right? Similarly, its adoption in a bigger scale is what we call that as a SOAR as a technology. Between 2017 to 2018, we have brought the aspect of complementing the business. That's what we call that as a business driven security. So earlier it used to be working on silos. Between 2017 and 2018, organization, they re-strategized and redefined their information security policy in concurrence with the business objectives and the goals. That's what we call that as a business driven security. And controls have become cloud native, and then more contextualization being brought in, and adoption of cyber kill chain and managed detection and response processes have kicked in. Between 2018 to 2020, we are talking about zero trust model, where we don't even trust anything and only allow only what has been what we want to authorize or authenticate, right? So zero trust is still in the initial stage. Only few handful of vendors have adopted this zero trust as a principle for their products, and it is still seeing its evolution. Big data is one of the things that we are talking about in the cyber industry, where it is building a data lake for with the logs flowing in from different controls and being looked at as a single repository for your monitoring, hunting, all such purposes. And blockchain is being adopted, and there are only few success stories of blockchain implementation in cybersecurity to break the chain of events in any incident or fraudulent activities, but there's a long way to go. Artificial intelligence that's been adopted. There are AI ML based products that are there. The technologies are started adopting the capability of AI and ML, bringing the data science to their product for taking their product to the next level. So from a law and regulation perspective, Information Technology Act of 2000 is what the governing thing in India, which actually provide the legal recognition for the transactions, and this is actually classified into civil offences and criminal offences. There are sections and articles which are focused for different purposes of cyber crimes. I'll not take much time to discuss about, because we are already running out of the time. We'll focus on the next topic now. So just to summarize, like what we get as a benefit of a as a for cybersecurity on cybersecurity is to protect your network and data from unauthorized access, improved information security and business continuity management, and gaining the stakeholder confidence, faster recovery times, and protecting the organization's brand credentials, right? And the advantage that we have is in terms of protecting the data information and reducing the risk. In fact, in some cases it stops the threats as well, and in some cases at least it gives us the visibility, thus by gaining the customer confidence. So what we can do as an individual or even part of the organization, the basic things, right? So enforce strong authentication, like implementation of two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. There are different controls are there. Like you can use Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator as a service. There are RSA that is actually providing the the tokens, right? Start using it so that you strengthen your authentication itself, because if most of the breaches, I would say almost 99% of the breaches are happening by compromising the known credentials, right? There is a weak authentication controls and processes in place. That's why the attacker was able to gain the access to the sensitive information. So practice by having strong authentication even to your personal emails. Change your passwords at least once in 3 months or 6 months for your personal accounts, and enable multi-factor authentication. Start looking at your activity history so that you'll come to know whether if someone else is accessing your identity, and also secure your passwords. Don't keep a common password across multiple accounts, and if you are not able to remember the passwords, um, you can actually use a password vault. um, okay. um, you can where you can remember the master password, and all portal passwords can be stored with the database is encrypted, and you don't need to remember multiple passwords. Rather, you can remember one master password and don't share it, right? And to ensure that your systems are updated, I mean free from vulnerabilities, you do a periodic vulnerability assessment and do the software patching. Practice IT hygiene. So when I say practice IT hygiene, which means make sure that you have the required controls at your endpoints and the network level. So what we call that as a defense in depth, right? So you have the defensive controls across, and also make sure that that is actually updated and working, right? That's what the hygiene part is. So we can have the antivirus if its virus definitions are not updated for 6 to 8 months, then it doesn't protect you from the latest threats, right? So ideally you need to make sure that you have the necessary processes in place to make sure that like antivirus, the virus definitions or the signatures are getting updated daily basis, and you are deploying the security patches, and you are ensuring that you institutionalize strong authentication controls, and practice or rather implement proper access control list and all to safeguard your assets. And the last important is in terms of you yourself being aware about the threats, and being very cautious. So we have come to the end of the first session, and just to um, pass on the message that security is incomplete without you, and it is everyone's responsibility. Even at a personal capacity, at an individual capacity, we have to be aware, because we have we are working on gadgets, right? Electronic gadgets, where entire your data is actually in your mobile phone. You transact your financial transaction in your banking app. You have your emails, personal emails, and then you have your personal information stored on your phone, and you have your um, um, your trading or any other sensitive information, right? Even your mobile phone is actually an asset, and that will also be targeted, right? So you need to make sure that like you update your phone with the latest security updates, you update your apps. You also make sure that like you don't give your phone to others, and also ensure that you enable the security by either by biometric or by pattern or pin, whatever, for the respective application as well, so that no one, even if they gain the access to your mobile phone, they will not gain access to your data and also do any malicious transactions. Your data, it'll be secure only if it is with you. If it goes to other hands, you cannot define the boundary, or you cannot ensure that it is secure. Yeah, thank you about it. And before we get on to the next session on cyber threats and cyber crimes, I'll just take 2 minutes to hear from you, if at all you want to clarify um, anything that we had discussed. Need not be what we have covered, but even cyber security as a domain, if you want to have any clarification, feel free to just voice
Yes,
out.
sir. Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. My name is Purnima Naik. I am from C Cyber Kolhapur. I have one question to ask you, sir.
Yes, please.
Are the dash lane one password safe to use? Are they secure? How they work? Where they store the passwords?
So sorry, come again. There was a
Yeah,
pause.
dash lane. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, the softwares dash lane. You talked about the password wallets.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
dash lane one password, are they safe to use? Because very critical confidential information we reveal to the softwares. So are they safe to use, and how do they work, where they store the passwords? Because there is only master key which has to be.
Yes. So ideally, in this case, right, there are two things. One, there is a standalone password vault which doesn't store, which stores the information or the credentials only on your system, and it will not have any synchronization to the respective product vendor's site or something. And the second one is on the SaaS offering, where leverage, you create an account and you store all your credentials over there, and you will have ability to have a synchronization across multiple devices and wherever you want to, at whatever the time that you want to, right? So there is a high risk in terms of storing your credentials in the cloud, or in the services that you get, right? So that's why it is advised to have a local password vault where it is completely under in your control. And both has got its pros and cons, right? If you are storing it in one system, then you might have to manually do a replication or synchronize in different asset periodically whenever you have an update. Whereas the other way, when it is a SaaS offering, you don't need to, because it is going to be stored centrally and you can have a synchronization. So my personal view is, you need to read their terms and conditions. You need to understand how they actually store, what they store. So when they are storing it, what is the encryption that method that they follow, whether it is actually getting stored as is, as a plain text, or they apply any encryption algorithm to encrypt and store it, and if so, where it is getting stored, who and all will be having the access to it, right? Me being an administrator will have the complete access, right? So you also need to go through their terms and conditions, and also how it works from the respective SaaS offering vendors portal, that is clearly been articulated. So my personal view is, you have the on-prem, I mean your own repository database which is completely encrypted, and you set a master password to it, and just take the pain of getting it replicated, because none of the password vaults, whatever they offer, right, those are not secured. Some are the other vulnerabilities are there. Even the master passwords are broken in past, right? So it is advised to have a local copy, but it is up to you how you want to adopt it. It is balancing between the experience and the security, right? So you want to have a better experience. You don't need to take the pain across having the synchronization, manual synchronization across the devices. You can go for a SaaS offering. And I mean, I'm not saying that everything is vulnerable, because though they're also bound to rules, regulations, and if at all by accidentally they expose your information, the master key, which will gain the access to all other information, they're legally liable, right? So that's why I suggest you to go through terms and conditions of the different service offering, and whatever you feel that it is the best, you can go for it.
So two more related questions I'm having on this. If the password is stored locally, so this is you told on the cloud storage and the local storage. If it is stored locally, then I will have to operate from the same machine. I'll not be able to operate it through the different. It will be on my personalized.
Yes.
That is one. Second, if I'm looking for some applications which I write on my own, like putting all the confidential information in the database, encrypting it, and then the Dashlane works in a different way. The moment I log into my Gmail or other accounts, the password, everything will be automatically entered. So this functionality I cannot have at my end. So that is one. Another, suppose I am an administrator. If I operate from the admin account and then create this Dashlane password wallet, then whether it will be accessible to other accounts also on the same machine.
See, that depends on the level of permission that you give. Okay, so just to address your first question, that's what I told. It's a balancing between experience and security. Okay, and if you want to have a better experience, anyway, you go with such kind of a cloud offerings. And in manual, you might have to manually define it. But for the applications to auto sign in, and if you have different applications where you don't want to key in your credentials manually and directly auto fetch, there you actually authorize and authenticate that particular application to talk to the database, fetch that information, right? So if I'm able to find a vulnerability on your application itself, then through that I can actually query your database and then crawl the entire credentials that have been stored, right? So all these things happens, especially in the SaaS offerings and all. There are multiple things getting integrated with API. So there are information that are getting exchanged by creating a API key, but with the relevant privileges. But what happens is, if the attacker gains access to the API key, then he has everything, right? So that's how you need to look at in this perspective as well.
So if I store them locally, how it is going to be different from the encrypted cookies?
So encrypted cookies is at your host level, and also taken care by your browser, right? Here I'm saying yeah, complete isolation of your password management. Okay, so the application will talk to the database to fetch the credentials and authenticate, and will have the cookie in your browser, right? It is about the session. I mean, nothing to do with how it is getting stored, where it is getting stored. In fact, you can also what to say, if you have your own infrastructure within your organization, you can have a password vault as well, right? That's where the PIM and the PAM as a technology, privilege identity management and privilege access management, comes into place, where it actually looks at the password vault, get the information, authenticates, and elevate the access if it is required, or look at the identity and provision what level of access it is actually required for the respective user on whatever application. And it actually automate. There is a possibility that you can also automate the signing in, and there are other things like single sign-on and SAML integration and all coming into place for auto sign-in with your Active Directory. right? You don't need to actually have a separate database. But for the other applications, either you can implement single sign-on, or you can have a separate password vault where you can actually define, you can fire a API query to look at the credentials, fetch it, and then orchestrate it to sign in each and every time when you visit the respective portal or the application.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So,
Madam, what is the scope of, hello, madam?
Yeah. Tell me.
Madam, what is the scope of these cyber security for the young fresh engineers nowadays?
Yeah, actually, there is a high scope. In fact, I'll be talking about the supply demand as well. I thought of covering in the while concluding the session, but as you had asked, there's a huge supply demand issue, which means there are less cybersecurity professionals as against the required numbers in the industry. Okay, and as a fresher, they can actually start their cybersecurity career in different domains in terms of getting themselves skilled on vulnerability assessment, and then slowly shape up their career for getting into a penetration tester and then a red teamer, all such things. And if they want to get into cyber defense, they can start their career as a security analyst for the incident response, and then elevate their role to level 2 security analyst, where they can do malware analysis, reverse engineering, forensics. Like that, they can shape up their career. And in fact, one of the things that we sense, because there is a high demand for the cybersecurity professionals, in our organization, we predominantly hire freshers directly from the academia, and cross-train them on cybersecurity, which would be on 3 to 4 month hands-on training, on-the-job training, and then we will get them deployed. In a way, we are able to sustain ourselves to meet the need for the cybersecurity professionals within our organization, right? So in industry as well, if you look at every other industry is concerned about securing themselves, right? That's especially the banking and financial institutions, and then manufacturing, and then healthcare industry. So everyone is actually hiring the cybersecurity professionals, and when there is a lack of lack of availability of the such professionals, they started looking at hiring the students and getting them cross-trained. In fact, many universities and colleges, they started offering cybersecurity as one of the mainstream for past 6 to 7 years, and we are seeing the students adopting it or taking cybersecurity as a major stream in their curriculum itself. And there's a huge demand, and it is going to evolve as well. And if you there are some study, probably end of the session, I'll project one of the study which we had recently conducted along with the NASCOM, which talks about the supply demand issue of the cybersecurity professionals. Surely there is a high potential and good future for the students who take cybersecurity as their career right from their initial stages. Any other questions?
Yeah, I enjoyed your lecture. Thank you very much. A lot of information, and concluding session also we are waiting for you. My name is M. Hawladar. I'm a veteran, 60 years old, young from IIT Kharagpur. I request you to join to the WhatsApp group of these participants, which is found by Dr. Bala. Okay. I believe they will not disturb you personally.
Sure,
You
sir.
can join to the
Yeah, sure. I don't have the WhatsApp group link. Probably Professor Dr. Bala can add me to that group so that I can.
He's our administrator, some guide.
So let's get into the next session on. So, yes, sir. You are about to say something.
Yeah, it's over from my side.
Yeah. So next session is on cyber threats and cyber crime. So what we are going to discuss in next 45 minutes is about different cyber threats and crimes that are happening, and what kind of a threats an individual is experiencing, and what kind of a threats an organization is experiencing, and what we see as a future cyber threats, right? So if you look at cyber crime are happening across, and it is a criminal activity that involves a computer either as a tool or as the target, right? There are different definitions that have been given by different organization or researchers or analysts as well. So yeah, the offenses are ranging from criminal activity against the data to content and copyright infringement. This is the definition given by Council of Europe's CC Treaty. And UN actually refers to the act of fraud, forgery, and unauthorized access which involves computers. That's how UN defines the cybercrime. Right? So these are carried out to generate benefits for the cyber criminals. And these are orchestrated or carried out against computers and devices directly to damage them or disable them or you know spreading the malware, stealing the information, whatever been the objective of the attacker. So there are different types of crimes. One, computer assisted crimes. This is where criminal activities are carried out using computers as a tool and not a specific against the other computers, right? Some kind of fraud, some kind of a denial of service attack or such example. Second one is computer as a target crimes, right? Criminal activities are focused on systems, network devices, infrastructure, and then data stored. Okay, this is like sniffing, viruses, and then data exfiltration. All such things are treated as computers as target crimes. Third one is computers incidental to the crimes, right? So I would say like getting your mission compromised without your knowledge, if it is acting as like a bot, all such things are incidentally that happens, right? It is not focused on you, I mean targeted against you or a specific organization, but opportunistically or incidentally they get compromised, and they then they are part of the cyber crimes. This is a major classification, and how the cybercrime happens is like there are two types again. One is unorganized cyber crimes, and second one is organized. So unorganized are purely by opportunistic attackers. So these are orchestrated to have a wider footprint, but not necessarily to target or having a focus on certain individuals or organization or a specific country or government, right? So this is usually by the work of an individual and decentralized. So now we see multiple unorganized crimes have been done by a group of attackers. They collaborate with each other, and then initiating such kind of a crimes. And so it is kind of a hit and run mentality kind of thing. And when you look at organized cyber crimes, these are centralized, and they have an objective, a motto, a modus operandi, right? These what we call that as focused and targeted cyber crimes, where state sponsored or nation sponsored attackers are organizing or initiating such kind of crimes. there are multiple motives behind the cyber crimes. Predominantly one in terms of information and data theft or manipulation of the data, which disrupts the data integrity, data exfiltration, intellectual property theft. All such things are one of the motive. Second one is creating the fear and chaos by disrupting critical infrastructure. So basically, the denial of service attacks kind of a thing, right? And threatening them. So if you are, I can do a small proof of concept to initiate a denial of service attack and bring down one of the service and actually threatening the organization if to demand for a ransom, and if they are not paying it, they will initiate a similar attack across all their infrastructure and applications. So that will create a major disruption. So with that, organization fear for that and create a chaos. They get panic for such kind of attack. Okay. And third one is it leads to creating a financial loss and damaging the reputation of the organization of the target, right? So the target can be organization, enterprise, or an individual, and also the governments as well, right? So as an individual, you would have seen many of the incidents which have happened recently. Even Amazon CEO was one of the was the target for one of the campaign where his personal information was exfiltrated, which has created a brand damage of himself as an identity, and it had also had the impact on his personal life as well, right? And some of the organization which have experienced a huge financial penalty, and they had to bring down their service, which has incurred the financial loss to them, right? And then the fourth one is demanding ransom, because earlier it used to be like I want to create a damage, like I want to bring down that service without even gaining the benefit, self benefit, monetary benefit, right? With like viruses, trojan, malware, all such things. But now attackers, they want to have a return on their investment. That's why they start to demanding for a ransom. Ransomware is one classic example, right? So until WannaCry came into existence, people are not much familiar about cyber security, or doesn't even have the they don't pay attention to patch their controls, their systems and all, right? So that had created a major awareness in terms of how important the cyber security is. So demanding ransom is one of the motive behind the cyber crime. And then the other one is propagating religious or political beliefs. So one of the classic example is 2016 election of United States, where Cambridge Analytica played a major role in terms of propagating Trump's election manifesto or propaganda and all, right? So that could be one of the motive, and the disrupting business continuity as well. This is ideally been adopted by the organization who engages the cyber criminals to orchestrate the attack to take the competitive advantage, right, based on the situation. So if you look at cyber security as a domain, this is what it happens. This is again one of the study which Infosys has independently conducted with a certain set of customers, and also with the security analyst and the practitioners, right? So there are at least one attack happening every, or rather three attacks happening every 2 minutes. There are 11 records getting leaked in 2 minutes, and then 3 organizations fall victim to ransomware attacks in 3 minutes, and then nearly 2.9 million lost to cyber crime in every 60 seconds. $25 is the average cost that the organization is paying, um, uh, uh, you know, for the breach that they experience, and then 1,861 people fall prey to the scams, predominantly predominantly in the phishing attacks. So this is again, I mean, if you look at the numbers, this is a recent study done by Infosys partnered with a different organization, and if you look at the the amount of lost, it is coming to trillions in a year. I mean, I agree with you, Professor. It is in trillions that came out as part of the latest study, but nevertheless, like 2019 statistics is what I had projected earlier. When you look at only on 2020, right, we had seen some kind of change in the statistics of malware attacks, right? This is between January to July. Um, what we had seen is at least we had taken the first half and first half of the data, what has happened, and compared that with the previous year of the first year, I mean 2019, right? So there were 3.2 billion malware attacks, right? These are not unique, but the spread of the malwares, and which has seen a decrease of 33 percentage from 4.8 billion to 3.2 billion. It was 4.8 in the first half of 2019, and 1.7 million encrypted threats, which we had seen a decrease of 32 percentage, and 41.2 million cryptojacking attacks, which has decreased by 12 percentage throughout across the globe, and there were 2.3 trillion intrusion attempts. We had seen more intrusions are happening, and if you look at, there were intrusion attacks that are happening, like initiating a denial of service attack or application layer attack, all such things. We had seen 19 percentage increase in first half of the year itself, and then 121.4 million ransomware attacks. It has grown up by 20% as compared to the first half of 2019, and 20.2 million IoT malware attacks, which had seen in the first half of the year, which is a 50 percentage more than the previous year, right? So this is based on other studies which we had sourced from outside. Um, but nevertheless, like, one thing that we can see is attacks are increasing. There is a shift of from one to the other by the attackers. If you look at, there are less number focus on the malware and more number of focus, more attacks are focused on the ransomware, right? Because earlier it used to be only some set of attackers were developing the ransomware, and then they initiate the operation, right? Now ransomware as a service is being offered, which means you can actually buy the ransomware payload actually as from the attackers, and then initiate the attack, and whatever the ransom being been paid by the victims, there will be a share between the actual ransomware developer and also the person who has obtained that particular service, right? That's why we are seeing a lot of ransomware attacks. And then IoT malware, because now the focus is more on targeting IoT devices. You would have heard about Mirai malware, which has actually compromised the DVR, NVR, and all, which had initiated a massive 1.2 TB of denial of service attack against the DNS, right? So now all these IoT devices are with lightweight kernels, right? And security is not thought through when it is being developed. But now, because many other devices are coming, my refrigerator is IP enabled, internet connected. My TV is internet connected. My microwave oven is internet connected. My camera surveillance system is internet connected, right? My building management, my elevator, my escalators, and whatever, right? Everything is connected, and that is what the attackers wanted to intrude on, because these are the devices for which have been developed without considering security, okay, at the initial stage. So that's why you could see like many controls are coming in now, many players are coming to have the IoT, having a stake on the IoT arena, IoT security arena, to discover the IoT devices in the network and then understand its a firmware version and look at what all the vulnerabilities it is exposed to and how it can be mitigated. There's a strong focus on that, and that's why like we see the shift has turned towards the targeting the IoT from the previous year. Just to touch upon on ransomware alone, because that has been the buzzword which everyone is actually hearing every other day, because every other day new ransomwares are coming, new family of ransomware or new variants of the same family is targeting the organization, right? It is actually a type of malware that attempts to deny the access to the user's data by encrypting it until a ransom is paid. So with the evolution of the cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and all, it is making very easy for the attackers to create a wallet with a wallet address being published as part of the payload and demand the ransom to be paid in bitcoins, right? In a way it is completely anonymous. In term, we will not even know like who has targeted and to whom the money has been transferred to. In fact, according to FBI, $1 billion have been paid to ransomware scammers, and especially in year 2020. Okay, FBI published a report in July or August time frame where these statistics have been pulled in from, and 400% of increase in ransomware attack in 2020. Especially this is from the US geography, because FBI looks at only from the US specific, and then $20 billion damages have been predicted in 2021, right? And again, all these four statistics are from US specific. Okay, and every 11 seconds businesses are falling victim to a ransomware attack. That is actually the prediction in 2021. And what we see in the cyber threat landscape is, I have actually broken down into three things. One, what is that we are seeing like evolving, the rising threats in terms of brand impersonation and typo-squatting domains, what we call that as a cyber squatting, right? So I impersonate a domain which which I create a reputational damage to the organization, and I impersonate some organization and claim something like I can actually host a phishing site, and for in the brand of Coca-Cola, and I can actually ask the user to sign in with their Gmail credentials, so that they get eligible for some reward or getting some voucher or whatever, right? So those things are getting that's where the brand impersonation happens. In fact, some of the fraudulent fraudsters, they use organizations brand uh, to conduct the job fair which is fake, and they ask the students or the people who are looking for a job for some money like 50,000, 1 lakh, and they give assurance that they will get a job in some of the organization, and then they vanish, right? So these are some of the classic example of brand impersonation. And second one is targeted phishing attacks to steal the credentials and sensitive information, and is a business compromise, right? So business email compromise is again a terminology that has been coined 2-3 years back, where official mail IDs are being compromised and initiating an attack through that, so that you feel that you see a legitimate mail coming in, but the links are phishing links in the body. Okay, and then more reconnaissance is happening on the organization publicly exposed infra and app to find the vulnerabilities, so that organization they will not actually patch immediately when the vulnerability gets disclosed. So it gives a time window for a threat actor to find the vulnerability, try to exploit it, and create a damage. So voice phishing are happening. You would have personally, got a call like, I'm calling from SBI Bank or HDFC or ICICI, and to your reward points will get expired, and to get it expired, I need your mother's maiden name, date of birth, and the card details, so that we will extend the reward for 1 more year. You can actually redeem the rewards for buying something, right? These are voice phishing to harvest the sensitive details. And there are advanced and sophisticated malware attacks that we see, and attacks through email spoofing, and also exploitation of the vulnerabilities, right? These are the things that we are seeing a spike. And when you look at threats which are very predominant, is ransomware attack, right? We would have seen at least 100 plus unique ransomware attacks or family or variants seen in past 9 months, right? And that is actually growing. Earlier it is actually looked at as a disruptive technique, right? um, because you encrypt and then the demand for the ransom, and some organization pay, some organization don't pay. But most of the organizations, when they strengthened their backup strategy and restoring from the backup, so that they have the lesser impact, they didn't even pay ransom to the attackers. So that's why, like, the threat actors have actually strategized to exfiltrate the data first before even encrypting it, and then started publishing it in their portal, right? It can be accessed in the Tor network, dark web, where some of the extracted data will be published as a sample. If the organization is not paying, they claim that they will publish all the data. So in a way, organization, if they don't have a proper backup, they need to rely on the attacker to get those data back, right? By paying a ransom. So that's why, like, the shift of the motive of the ransom attack shifted from being destructive or disruptive to the extortion, right? And then denial of service attacks and insider threats as well. So while we talk about the external threat actors, we have people, disgruntled employees within the organization who wanted to create some impact to the organization. And that's why, like, insider threat plays a major role. Or rather, like, it is more important to focus on insider threat, because they are already part of the organization ecosystem. They have the access, they know what it is in the organization better than the external attacker. So that's why it is more important to detect inside threats as well. And some of the other prominent threats are supply chain attacks that we are seeing, man in the middle attack, which has been in existence for a decade, that is also been seen, crypto mining attacks, and eavesdropping attacks. So eavesdropping attacks is predominantly by deploying a malware to sniff and understand or doing a eavesdropping. Okay. This is, I mean, what different kind of impacts the organization can experience if they experience a cyber attack. One is on the brand reputation, losing the customer confidence, having a financial loss and the business impact, and they also have a regulatory and compliance impact. When you look at the cyber crime and the cyber threats, right? Hackers are behind, attackers are behind. When we look at the different types of hackers, right? We have the black hat hackers, who are the individuals with extraordinary skills for them to develop their own malware and then creating an impact. And they work with some of the organization as well, some of the governments as well, and they'll be a freelancer and they do it for their personal benefit. Okay. And they don't what to say, they don't claim themselves as a black hat uh, themselves in in the cybersecurity space. But recently, with more things are coming, these black hat hackers are now looked at as a big bug bounties, right? Bug bounters. So they participate in some of the hackathon events conducted by some of the major organization on their products to break, to identify the vulnerability and break it so that they get the monetary benefit ethically. Okay, so white hat are the individuals who are the security professionals or the security analyst who works for an organization or individually, but doing the finding the vulnerabilities and giving a sense of the security posture of an organization in an ethical manner, right? So gray hat or some of the individuals who work both offensively and defensively as well at various times, and individuals who aim to bring down some of the critical infrastructure for a specific cause and without understanding what would actually be the consequence for them, they are called as a suicide hackers, right? And the rest of the hackers are like script kiddies. So we don't need to be much worried about the script kiddies because they individually don't have a talent or the skill to come out with their own strategy to hack into the system or attack any organization. They leverage some of the previously orchestrated cybercrime or the payloads or the malware, and get it slightly customized to them, custom tailored to them, and get it orchestrated, right? So we see more students are part of this script kiddies category because they many of the malware's source code is now published in GitHub, so they start getting it downloaded, custom it based on to an extent based on their thing. They do it for some fun, or they do it for testing their skills as well. Okay, and the next one is the state sponsor or the hackers. They are very serious because they are funded by the governments, by the not by by the governments itself, by the country, right? So they will have all the tools, technologies, everything with them to orchestrate an attack. So based on geopolitical agenda, okay, and they predominantly target some of the specific countries uh, based on the rather government's interest, or when they see some kind of discomfort with any of the other country on their political propaganda, right? So you can see like China, they have their own state-sponsored attackers. Lazarus Group is actually named. They are the North Korean attackers, right? So they are state-sponsored, which means the government is behind them. And then the next group of hackers or cyber terrorists who are actually having a wide range of skills, okay, with the political beliefs and create a fear by large scale disruption. So which we spoke about the modus operandi in the previous slides. So whom we call that them as a cyber terrorist. And the last group whom we call them as a hacktivist, are the individuals who promote themselves for a specific political agenda, by hacking, especially website defacement or disabling websites. You would have seen, especially when there is some you know geopolitical issues, and there is some border disruptions are there. Usually you can see some kind of activist from the respective country initiating a attack on the other country, where they try to exploit the vulnerability. They deface the web page, and that is with the specific political agenda. Okay, it happens when there is any war against, or rather some kind of a firing happening in the line of control between India Pakistan, or India China. So all such thing happens, right? Some of them, they don't I mean, they're anonymous, right? First, one of the group, we call them as a anonymous group. They work with some kind of a political agenda. So some of the other emerging threats, we had seen a rise of what kind of a current threats are emerging. Some of the other threats that we are seeing are attacks based on AI/ML. So if you look at last year Black Hat conference, yeah, the attacker has actually demonstrated a ML based malware itself with the AI capability, right? So it is not artificial intelligence and machine learning is not only adopted by the cyber security controls to have kind of a cyber defense, but also been leveraged by the malwares, by the attackers. So they actually profile, they understand what you do, how you do everything, and then when you are actually idle, so what kind of things that you usually do, and accordingly it learns on its own and then initiate or rather do its objective when it can be not noticed. That's last year 20 is under and sandbox evasion malware. This is something very interesting. So controls have come with the sandboxing technologies where you detonate the malware or access the URL in the sandbox environment to understand it better. But now the malware has the capability to evade that as well, because when it's been detonated in a sandbox environment and been detected, the attackers will not be able to achieve their objective. So they start looking at the evasion techniques and start putting it packaged in their payload itself, and that is what we are seeing now. That we are seeing a lot of malwares adopting to it, so that even the sandboxing controls that have been put up at the network layer or gateway, it doesn't even detect, and then it pass through and compromise the systems. The next one is a fileless malware where we see where there is no trace of it, especially by the execution of some of the built-in commands itself. So PowerShell being a powerful tool for the attackers to actually execute some of the built-in internal commands of the operating system in Windows. So that's been leveraged so that there is no trace of the actual payload or some of the other payloads for footprint or lateral movement being seen in this compromised systems. Let's talk about some of the predominant threats. So if you look at ransomware, it is predominantly targeted to the organization, and it is looked at as a cyber extortion. The motivation or the modus operandi is to demand and obtain the ransom from the users. It is orchestrated through phishing emails or some of the spam emails which contains a link to the ransomware, which is predominantly achieved through drive-by download or drive-by attack. So next one is on the IoT attacks, which we are seeing, which is a destruction. In fact, in 2008, 2008, one of the attack, which is a configure virus, right, which has been targeted on the SCADA systems. The Stuxnet is the malware, right? So that was one of the IoT attack which has actually, uh, created an awareness within the energy and utilities industry to focus on cyber security to protect their own infrastructure. So the motivation is to steal some of the sensitive information and also to compromise, to create a destruction in the organization. And it is achieved through some of the phishing emails, drive-by attack, malware download, or master of devices, which means like if I have to compromise some of the cameras, still the feed which are coming from the cameras, right? I compromise its master, which is actually the DVR or NVR, right? By compromising it, I will actually have the control to all the cameras connected to it, and I can directly redirect the feeds coming from that particular camera to my own infrastructure, right? So that I can do a surveillance and know whether what is happening in the data center, who is there in a restricted area, and orchestrate some kind of an attack there. And also I can use such kind of a cameras to initiate the attack as like a bot, right? The next one is on cyber espionage. So predominantly organizations, enterprise and governments are being targeted and aimed at the data exfiltration. The motivation behind that is to gain the intellectual property and the secrets, which we call that as a data theft or information theft, and which is achieved through by the deployment of advanced and sophisticated malware, either or drive download attack, or even the files being sent through USB, or even with the malicious attachments, right? By compromising the systems with these modes, and which has the capability of data exfiltration or data leakage. Firmware attacks are with the disclosure of meltdown and spectre vulnerabilities last year, it is some of the advanced attacks, they started looking at compromising the system at the firmware level itself, because we see a lot of controls that are coming on top of the operating system layer. So which means operating system is keeping a track of what is after the operating system getting loaded, whatever comes in, it has the visibility and detects, alerts, or prevents it. But attacker has gone one level below to compromise the underlying firmware itself. In fact, there are some attacks which has actually compromised the hypervisor in a virtual environment, so that the attacker has the complete visibility of all the virtual instances or a virtual private network within that particular, based on that particular hypervisor, they have the access and they can do whatever they wanted to. So which is widely been seen. That's achieved by corrupting or rewriting the chips with the malware, right, which are vulnerable to it. So ideally, it is also been looked at as a cyberbullying and spying in by the attacker, right? So malvertising is another threat that individuals and organizations are experiencing, predominantly to steal the data, including sensitive information like PII, PHI, and it is categorized as an info stealer malware. This is achieved through phishing emails and email containing to a malware hosted or ransomware hosted sites, right? So the information is being stealed is actually sent to the command and control center, where it's been from where her attacker actually collects and can reuse it, right? So the information can be reused for any purpose, and how it impacts the individual is by the collection of your private information or sensitive information, your like your date of birth, mother's maiden name. I mean, everyone has the soft copy of their Aadhaar card, their PAN card in their mobile devices, right? All such files are getting exfiltrated. So after stealing that information, attacker can do whatever that they wanted. Social engineering, ideally it spans across different things like spear phishing, voice phishing, which I explained earlier, shoulder surfing, dumpster diving, what we call, okay, where people look at the recycle bin, some of the deleted files, and if I'm having a physical access, I look at your dustbin as well to gather some sensitive information, and then mail outs, and also by performing a forensic analysis as well. This is also looked at as a info stealer when we looked at from an attacker's perspective, and it's been targeted against organizations, individuals, governments, and enterprises with the with the motivation of financial gain and political activism, self-interest, taking a revenge, and external pressure. Some of the common cyber attacks that we see currently, which are leveraged by cyber criminals, or denial of service attacks, malware attacks, MITM, social engineering, drive-by attacks, and application attacks, and the password attacks. So password attacks, we unknowingly give out our credentials, and which can actually lead to a major attack against an organization or something. Even individually, if your credentials are getting exposed, I request you to kindly get it changed, because if you look at recently, Zomato got breached 2 years before, and then Yahoo got breached. Best Buy got breached recently, and many other organizations. We subscribe ourselves to Zomato and other forums, right? The weakest point with the human is we keep common or similar passwords across multiple accounts. The moment if I am able to collect all the exposed credentials, I can do an analytics in terms of understanding a pattern and the trend of your the password that you are setting. So ideally, I can do a brute force against some of the other accounts with my guessed password, right? So that is very important to safeguard ourselves, our organization as well. And some of the other okay, so this I want to bring it up because recently Information Security Forum, which is a non-profit organization where cyber security professionals across the globe are partner and contribute to that as well. They recently did a study and released a Threat Horizon Report 2022. So in 2022
Sorry, sir,
we
but
can
actually slides are not changing.
I'm not sure. Is it for
is
you?
I can see IoT attacks, the slide number 16.
So is it for others as well?
Yeah. It's on slide
Yes.
number 16.
Yeah, slide number 16.
Let me just switch on my network.
Yes.
Give me a minute. Yeah, you are able to see the future threats.
No, we are able to see slide number 16. Now it is visible.
Okay, so
Yes,
sorry
visible.
about it. I think there's some network issue. I had to switch on my network. Okay, so so Information Security Forum is an organization.
नाही काय प्रॉब्लेम नाही आवाज येत नाही.
So 2022, what we can expect is what Information Security Forum has published. So we can anticipate these top 5 threats in future.
हे काढले की कसं आलं बघा तसं मला पाहिजे कारण मला हे लावलं की डोकं दुखा सुरू होते हो.
Can someone go and mute? Okay. So if you see like invasive technology disrupts every day of an individual and organization, which means there will be a lot of technology which will try to collect more information about you as an individual, about an organization, predominantly used for for better cyber defense, but still by compromising it, attackers take an advantage of such information. So now we see like more smart speakers are coming, like Alexa is there. Those are the technology that we are actually we are buying and using it in our day-to-day life, right? It is also
I think speaker's mic has been mute. So you are not, your voice is not audible.
I think someone has done a mute all. That's right. Okay. So again, let me repeat. So this is actually the prediction of threats by Information Security Forum. What we can expect in 2022. This is as part of the Threat Horizon report. So one of the technology that one of the threat that we can see is on the invasion technology. Now we use more and more smart speakers like Alexa and all, right? So it is also internet connected, and that is actually listening to what we discuss, what we converse in at home, right? And any vulnerability, if someone is trying, a malicious user is trying to find a vulnerability and exploits it, then it becomes like all your private conversation would be eavesdropped by the attacker. Right now we are speaking about only on smart speakers and home surveillance. So these are actually we are adopting as a technology that comes, and we want to have a better life, cyber connected and all those things. But what we forget is like it is including more on our private space, right? So that is going to disrupt our everyday life is what has been predicted. Second one is a neglected infrastructure is going to cripple operations, which means still we are living with the legacy infrastructure which the organization has invested a lot, and they try to use it, but there will be a lot of vulnerabilities, and there will not be any proper patching, and there will be a end of life support from the respective product vendor or the hardware vendor, which which will be possessing a major threat to the organization, and when it gets exploited, it is going to disrupt the entire operations. And third one, what we can expect is both cyber and physical going to combine together to to have a to shatter the business resilience, which means we can anticipate some in the insider threats, right? The insider disgruntled employees are being targeted by the external attacker, do brainwash, or they act as a sleeping cell to initiate some kind of a internal attack itself. That's why like we see a lot of potential coming in both from cyber and physical attacks coming together. And the attacks on the satellite communications, right? So that is going to get increased, and any with successful compromise. Let me take an example. So we all use Google Maps, all these things. These are based on the GPS coordinates, right? What if I have to travel from Bangalore to Hyderabad, and I'm just relying only on the GPS coordinates? When I do a driving, if someone is actually compromising the satellites and also the signals coming from them, if I change it to something else, then my entire route will get changed. Okay, I'm just taking a lame example, but it also applies, especially in the flight, right? So aeroplanes, they predominantly the autopilot mode works only based on GPS coordinates, right? So you will actually get lost and you will land somewhere else. Like that, we can bring up more use cases as well where there can be a disruption. There's attacks on connected vehicles. Now we see a lot of connected cars coming in, right? MJ Hector is one of the car that got released last year with which is internet connected. And if you look at Tesla in US, it is completely internet connected, and coming with their own technology for auto driving, all such things, right? So there will be a lot of attacks on those things as well, is what which has been anticipated. By with the successful attack on the vehicles, I can actually apply acceleration when there needs to be a brake needs to be applied, or I can apply a brake, sudden brake, all such things remotely. Okay, that's how it can cause. And from the individual perspective, we would have actually seen all these things, right? Like you getting a message that your mobile number have won some money, and you just need to click that link to get the reward and all. So that's predominantly a phishing sent through SMS, targeting against the individuals, right? People who are not aware about such kind of attacks, they fall prey to it. And the second one is especially for the banking transaction. So people who actually receives the mail that there is a transaction alert, and you have to sign in to validate or reverse the transaction if it is not authorized by you. So such links, such mails are actually phishing mails have been seen, at least thousands and thousands of phishing mails are seen across the globe. And the next one what we see is the voucher or gift card um, getting issued. Okay, this is how the brands are being impersonated and making the people to fall prey to it. So by getting this email, you are actually allowed to sign in with your Amazon account, and then they actually do the transaction with the saved cards. When the biggest advantage in such kind of a threads is like with the saved cards and some of the exposed or disclosed cards that are available in the dark web, right? That can be used for the international transactions without even depending on the OTP, because the international transaction doesn't mandate for OTP to come, right? So all these threats are all these kind of attacks are happening, and these kind of threats are specifically targeted against the individuals, right? So just to summarize, we had seen about cyber threats, threat actors, modus operandi, objectives, who is getting targeted for what kind of a purpose or motives, and how they are being targeted. So just to conclude the session, my suggestion is to be vigilant, be aware about what the cyber threats, and be cautious and don't fall prey to the threats and regret later, and you keep yourself abreast ahead, or keep yourself updated with what is happening in the cyber landscape, cyber threat landscape as well, right? So the message is be secure, be aware, and be security aware. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your insight, and we appreciate you taking the time to share the useful information.
Yeah. So thanks everyone. I hope it was informative. So I had to cover on the basics in the interest of participants. There could be mix of people who would be a researcher in cybersecurity, who would be pursuing cybersecurity as a curriculum, and there will be some people who would be with cyber computer science, or even with other discipline. So just to make sure that, like, I lay the, because this is the initial session, I thought let me lay the foundation of the cyber security, and also the threats that that you need to know of, so that the rest of the sessions, which are more technical in nature in terms of cryptography, ethical hacking, all such things, you can actually cross reference to this one, to have a better understanding of how those processes, or how those technologies, how those controls are implemented in cybersecurity by the Organization for Cyber Defense. That was my thought, right? So thanks everyone for patiently listening to me for past 3 hours. And any questions, feel free to drop a note. My ID is sangamesh_s@infosys.com. Okay, for the benefit of everyone, let me just put it up on the screen. So you can drop a note to me. I'll be more than happy to support, clarify, um, or partner with you in terms of if you want to take more sessions for your students. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I request our participants to leave this meeting and join back with a new link. A new link will be shared to you in a WhatsApp, and even I'll email you. So we'll be using a new link for session 3 and 4. Okay, so this link will no longer be valid. So please join with a new link, which will be shared via mail and via our chat group. Thank you.
Madam, session 3 will start at what time, madam? Hello.
Hello, sir.
Session 3 will start at what time?
2 o'clock, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.